proposal application process for round 2 of the Regional Climate Collaboratives program. My name is Ina Lupin. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the program manager for the Community Assistance for Climate Equity team, which administers this program. I'll ask our team of note takers and tech support to please introduce themselves via chat. And then we'd also love for you all to introduce yourselves via the chat, starting with your name, organization, and the region that you work in if you would like. You can post questions into the chat at any time during the presentation, and we'll do our best to answer as many of them as we can via chat or during the Q&A portions of the workshop. If you would prefer to ask your question verbally, feel free to just raise your hand and we can call on you to speak. We would like to begin today by acknowledging that this virtual meeting is taking place throughout the unceded territory of California, home to nearly 200 tribal nations. As we begin this meeting, we acknowledge the original inhabitants of our various regions. We honor and pay respect to their elders and descendants, past, present, and emerging, as they continue their stewardship of these lands and waters. And so with that, I think we can go to the next slide. So this is our agenda for today. We're going to walk through the Regional Climate Collaboratives program overview, the application process and components, the technical assistance and application resources, the threshold and scoring criteria. And then at the end, we'll have hopefully plenty of time for question and answer. We'll also be taking Q&A breaks throughout the workshop to keep things interactive and make sure that we answer your questions as we go throughout our slides. So we will be taking them, those Q&A breaks on slides that have this little icon that you'll see down here of a person thinking. And so keep an eye out for those opportunities to ask questions and engage with us. So we can go to the next slide. And so now I'll dive into just a high-level overview of the program. We can go to the next slide here. So the Regional Climate Collaboratives program is a capacity building grant program that aims to support cross-sectoral partners in coming together to develop processes, plans, and projects to sustain climate action. As many of you know, there are historic levels of funding that are coming down from the federal and state levels to address climate change and fuel a clean energy and transition. And so RCC is a really timely opportunity to help under-resourced communities take advantage of those dollars. The program is looking to support under-resourced communities in accessing funding to advance place-based and region-wide climate change mitigation, adaptation, and resiliency efforts. And we are also looking to fund both emerging and established collaboratives across the state. So we can go to the next slide, please. RCC has 4 program objectives that should be central to the goals, priorities, and activities of all of the collaboratives that are funded through the program. So those are developing actionable plans and projects, building social infrastructure, which can include, building partnerships and connections between different organizations and community groups, centering community engagement and decision-making, and developing equity-centered processes. You can go to the next slide. And so the eligible applicants for the program include California Native American tribes, community-based organizations and nonprofits, local public agencies, small businesses, and other organizations with a history of providing community-based outreach and technical assistance. Eligible applicants will need to form a regional collaborative partnership structure, which will collectively submit one application that's based on a shared vision between all of the partners. Each collaborative needs to select a managing partner that can demonstrate the organizational capacity to complete the projects and the financial capacity to receive and be accountable for the grant. For the full proposal, applicants will collectively submit a draft partnership agreement that describes the governance and organization of the collaborative partnership structure. Contrarily to in round 1, we will not be requiring that the partnership agreement be signed in this round. So we're hoping that will reduce barriers for folks that kind of based on some of the feedback that we received in round 1. We can go to the next slide, please. So the enabling legislation for the RCC program really calls out the importance of diverse partnerships. And the program is intended to help communities come together around a variety of different climate initiatives that span climate mitigation, adaptation, and resiliency. And so we really encourage collaboratives to seek partnerships with organizations that are doing different and complementary work so that your collaborative is able to advance a broad range of climate issues. The graphic that you'll see on this slide shows an example of some of the different kinds of issue areas that a collaborative might focus on, but it's really not an exhaustive list by any stretch. So, certainly any of the work that you all are doing in your communities that's related to climate mitigation, adaptation, and resiliency may make sense for this program. And so I'll now turn it over to my colleague, Sarah Risher, to walk us through the eligible activities.
Awesome, thanks, Ina. I did want to pause and see, actually, that last slide had the thought bubble, if there are any questions before I jump into my section.
Thank you, Sarah. I always miss this thought bubble.
I know it's early in the presentation, so there might not be thoughts quite yet, but if you do have any on this, anything Ina presented, you can feel free to ask those questions later on in the presentation. I can get started and share a little bit about our eligible activities, but before I do, I'm Sarah Risher. I'm a program analyst on the team. I use she, her pronouns. Very happy to be here and to see so many great organizations from across the state. It's very exciting to have you here. So how do collaboratives build capacity? This eligible activities section starts on page 9 of our program guidelines. If you're following along or have them open, the RCC program has a total of 6 eligible activity types or categories. 4 of these are required and 2 are optional. These activity types collectively should strengthen local coordination, leadership, knowledge, skills, expertise, and access to resources in under-resourced communities. Majority of our RCC activities come from our enabling statute, Senate Bill 1072, and they're intentionally broad. And this is so applicants can describe what these activities look like within their proposed project based off of their needs and their local context. We can go to the next slide. The screen looks frozen for me, so I'll just continue. Maybe it's just on my end, but I'll dive a bit deeper into each of our mandatory activities. So this first activity type 1 encompasses activities that support relationship building, priority identification, plan and project development. And each of the bullets here are actual activities we would like to see collaboratives do. Those related to relationship building are here on the screen, and that includes things such as collective visioning amongst collaborative members, supporting partnership development with funders and other entities that are external to the collaborative, and conducting community engagement. Next slide. So there's a lot of activities under activity type 1. So this next slide highlights the activities that support the identifying of priorities and development of plans, policies, and projects. So these include things like convening discussions on community needs regarding potential climate mitigation, adaptation, and resilience projects that are eligible for various funding programs. It includes developing and aligning community and project plans. So thinking of maybe updating general plans, local hazard mitigation plans, developing a climate action plan that identify multi-benefit projects that are prioritized by the community. And then also assisting in the development of local job training and anti-displacement policies and programs. On our next slide, we'll talk about activity type 2, which is serving as a technical assistance provider or hub. The intention for these specific set of activities is for the collaborative to provide support to collaborative members and provide support to external entities to help bring resources into your project area. And this includes things such as providing policy, program, and technical expertise to develop and align multi-benefit projects with potential funding support, and offering training for grant application development, project management, implementation, and monitoring. And then on our next slide, we'll talk about the final two required or mandatory activities. And this includes, evaluation. Grantees will reserve, or applicants will reserve 3 to 5% of their budget to work with an evaluation TA provider to measure and communicate project success. Evaluation activities include creating an evaluation plan and collecting and compiling data into templates that SGC will provide for grantees. And then grantees will also reserve 3 to 5% of their budget to participate in quarterly peer learning sessions that SGC will facilitate in partnership with a third-party technical assistance provider. So each collaborative will select 2 to 6 representatives to participate in the peer learning cohort, and majority of the peer learning will be virtual via Zoom, with the exception for 2 in-person events. We can go on to the next slide. So for optional activities, applicants have the option to incorporate these into their work plan, which we know can be central to capacity building. That includes data collection and analysis. So you can conduct data collection and analysis that helps you identify existing conditions, community priorities, and the impact of planned projects. You can also conduct education and training for entities within your collaborative or external to your collaborative within your project area that will really help build your overall region's capacity to compete for grants and implement projects into the future. And so I know I've shared a lot, so it might be helpful to see an example. This next slide comes from our example activity tables resource. So we understand the program has many required activities and really want to show you that you do not have to conduct all activities to the same degree, so you can really tailor it to your needs. This is hypothetical, so there could be an applicant, the collaborative, they want to identify funding sources that would improve pedestrian safety and advance active transportation projects in the communities of focus. And so under that overarching activity, they would write out however many subtasks that main activity would entail. And so this example includes 3 sub-activities. So the collaborative is conducting community engagement. They provide examples of what that community engagement entails, and that will allow them to collect data and identify needs and opportunities to improve the built environment. And then following that subtask, the collaborative would take what is learned from that community engagement process and then identify funding sources that align with those community needs that were previously identified. And then from there, the collaborative would reconvene residents and other entities to discuss and vote on projects based on the funding that is available at the moment and aligned with community needs. And so you'll see here on the right of the screen, this activity and its subtasks addresses 4 required activities and then 1 optional activity. And so you'll see in the applicant workbook, it's broken down so you can easily address all of the required activities, even though I know it seems like a lot. I will move on to our next slide to discuss our activity waiver request form. So this is a new thing to round 2. So during the pre-proposal phase, applicants can complete an activity waiver request form if they believe that one mandatory activity from activity types 1 and 2 is unnecessary or otherwise inappropriate for their proposal. And we provide more information in Appendix B within our guidelines on page, I think, 31, that has information on instances where maybe that might be the case for an applicant, and it provides details on how you can prepare a strong justification to have your activity waived. So you have 2 opportunities to submit this request form during the pre-proposal phase. So if you submit by August 11th, you will receive a response from SGC in advance of the pre-proposal due date. And if approved, you can submit a pre-proposal and a full proposal that reflects that waived activity. And then on September 6th, which is the due date for our pre-proposal, you can just submit it then. You'll get your response on the waived activity with your pre-proposal feedback, which Blanca will discuss more in a bit. And so if approved, then you'll be able to develop a full proposal omitting a waived activity. So I'll pause here since we have our thought bubble. Any questions on this? Or the activities in general. And folks can feel free to unmute. I see, Jim, you have a question.
So, thanks. This is really helpful, Sarah. So in the work that I'm doing with the group, we're doing a number of the different topical areas that you list as eligible. But say in the mandatory activity 1, we're doing a couple of those activities that you've listed for some topics and a couple of activities for another topic. So that's okay? Or are you needing to do basically all of the activities in that first mandatory 1 that you listed for everything that you're doing?
That's a great question. No, you don't need to do it for every activity you're doing. And it's another thing I should mention is this program in our enabling statute really encourages building on existing work that's happening within the community or the region. And so that is totally great to build upon what you're already doing. You wouldn't need to do each activity for each topic area, as long as your overall work plan across your entire scope of work, you are addressing all of the required or mandatory activities in some way, in a demonstrable way.
So you have to do something in each of the 4, but you don't have to do everything that you listed in each one of them. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So cool.
And I want to see if, yeah, of course. Ina wanted to jump in there.
Yeah, I wanted to just make sure, Jim, that I'm understanding your question, because I think within each bucket, all of the required activities do need to be addressed in some way. So it's not like you can, I'm not sure if I may be misunderstanding your question, but you can't like just do one activity within the list of the ones that are bucketed for activity group 1, if that makes sense. All of the activities that we have as a part of our program were actually included in statute. And so the program is, we do have this like list of required activities that all of our grantees need to be able to do, unless of course you go through the waiver process. But to Sarah,
maybe if you show the first element, the building relationships one, I can be more specific.
Totally, that sounds good. So I'm sorry, would you be able to go backwards a couple slides?
I was understanding the question of like for this, if for each broad activity, under each broad activity you don't need to achieve every single activity. So that's what I thought you were asking.
Yeah, so if you go forward.
One more forward.
Yeah. So here, you had 2 slides on this one. Do you need to do something in every one of these bullets?
Okay, yes, you do. But you don't need to address each of them in every subtask.
I don't know what that meant. So you have to coordinate with collaborative members, you have to support development of partnerships, you have to conduct community engagement, and then your next slide, you had 3 or 4 bullets as well. You have to do every one of those in your proposal. You have to have a local jobs training program.
Yes, so I would, yes, you need to address all of these bullets, and we have them outlined in the guidelines starting on page 9. But with the activity table that we showed, we were trying to communicate that you don't have to do it to the same degree, each of these bullet activities. And so you can really tailor it to what it would look like for your collaborative. So maybe one collaborative is really needing to do a lot of community engagement, do a lot of data collection, and they're heavier in the first part of the grant term on those components. And then like later in the grant term, they're doing more of the grant writing once they identify data and assess community needs. And so, but then it might be for another collaborative, they've done a lot of that work and they're ready to bring their partners together to do more of the TA work at the onset of the grant term. And so there's an array of activities for you to kind of determine when they would make sense for you based off of your collaborative partners.
I noticed we have a few questions in the chat here as well. And we can also, I don't know if it would be helpful maybe for us to go forward a few slides to the example that Sarah showed, that kind of shows, I think, how like one is like some of the subtasks that she was speaking to could like address multiple activities at the same time. And so maybe that might kind of help. I think that sometimes it's helpful also to just like when you're working through your work plan, it might help also to kind of see what it looks like on the page. But I see Lily Parker has a question. Do the activities have to occur after a certain date? For instance, if you had activities during a TCC application, can those activities be counted? So for that question, we would need for those activities to happen like as a part of the scope of work for RCC. So if you are carrying out those activities for another program, we would need like some part of that would need to be being funded through the RCC. Maybe there are some pieces of it that would be funded through TCC if you were also doing some of that work through the program, but we need to, as a collaborative, there would need to be some way that you're addressing each one of those required activities for the program. Okay, and thanks, May. I appreciate that follow up on your question. Okay, great. I think we've addressed all the questions in the chat then. Are there any additional questions?
Okay, I guess I can move forward and talk about our program deliverables. Awesome. So the work that the collaboratives do will result in few key deliverables, and that includes an action plan, which builds upon the scope of work and partnership agreement that are submitted in the application, and build out a little bit more detail and serves as your roadmap for the work during the grant term. And then collaboratives will also develop a capacity building toolbox, which compiles their work that they've created over the course of the RCC grant. And the goal of this is to serve as a public resource to entities within your region to access capacity building resources on an ongoing basis. So I think an example is if your collaborative is hosting community engagement trainings or any climate adaptation trainings, maybe those can be recorded and hosted within this online toolbox. Another outcome would be a community climate solutions inventory, which compiles your priority plans and projects that the collaborative either developed or updated during the grant term or would like to seek funding to implement after the grant term. And then also reporting. So with every invoice, you'll prepare a brief invoice report. We have a template that we provide our grantees for that. And then also annual reports. This is required by our enabling statute. Every year of the 3-year grant term, collaboratives will prepare an annual report that outlines the work that they've achieved over that year. And we also have templates that we provide our grantees to complete those on an iterative basis rather than waiting till right before they're due to pull something together. I can go on to our next slide to talk about our eligible costs. So we have 9 eligible costs for this program. That includes staff costs, so you can hire up. If you are needing additional staff capacity, that also includes interns and fellows. You can also hire consultants through this program and save or utilize up to 10% of your direct costs for consultants that you don't need to identify in the application. These could be, you can use this funding and as needs come up during the grant term and you realize, oh, we need to access this particular subject matter expert for this purpose. You can also save up to 15% of your overall direct cost to add new partners. So you'll have to have 4 partners at the time of application, but maybe through your community engagement work, you realize, oh, this other organization would be great to come on as a formal partner. They'll offer a lot to our collaborative. We also are able to cover the cost of tools, subscriptions, and software. We can also cover engagement, outreach, education, and training costs. And I'll note that food, childcare, and participation compensation are eligible costs if tied directly to an RCC work product. Also, we can cover the cost of travel throughout your region. And you can, peer learning, so saving 3 to 5% of your direct cost budget for peer learning, to participate in peer learning. The same for evaluation, 3 to 5% of your budget needs to be saved for evaluation. And then we are also can have an indirect cost rate of up to 30%. So that's it from me, but I'll stop to see if there's any questions on eligible cost or program deliverables before turning it over to Blanca.
Do you have a definition for new partners? Does that need to be another small business or a nonprofit? Like, how would you define a new partner?
Yeah, that's a great question. A new partner would need to be an eligible applicant type. And so a California Native American tribe, a public agency, community-based organization or nonprofit, small business, or we have that catch-all category of other organizations with a history of providing community-based outreach and technical assistance. So as long as they can demonstrate they've played that role within your project area, we would be able to approve them as a new partner.
Okay. And would you help with staffing, like, finding resources or interns? Is that something that we have to do on our own, or do we get any help with that?
SCC can promote any positions that our collaboratives post to help spread the word. We do have a third-party technical assistance team that is available to support collaboratives, and so they're able to help with, preparing duty statements or thinking through RFPs and things like that for consultants or adding staff.
Thank you.
Okay, I see a question here in the chat. Can you define indirect cost rate? I want to pull up the exact way we define it in the guidelines, but basically those costs that don't fall neatly into these other categories that are helping you maintain your operations of your organization. So I will drop the exact definition in the chat in just a moment. And so if there's any other questions on this. Okay, maybe I'll turn it to Blanca for walking us through what to expect for the proposal process, your application process.
Thank you, Sarah. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Blanca Escobedo. I'm a program analyst on the team, and I'm excited to dive into the application process and components with you all. If we can go to the next slide, please. Okay, actually, let's go to the next slide. So I'll start off with saying that for round 2, we have 2 different funding tracks that applicants can apply under for small and large grants. And the purpose for these 2 tracks is so that applicants can apply within the same pool of funding so that we can get more diversity in terms of scale and scope of awarded applications. The way we will fund the projects is that we will recommend awards to the 2 highest scoring applications from each track. And with any of the remaining additional funds, we will award the next highest scoring applications that are located in counties that have not yet received an RCC award in either round 1 or round 2, regardless of award size. You can go to the next slide. RCC is also authorized to use advance pay, meaning we can distribute up to 25% of the total grant award in advance, either in multiple small installments or one large sum, dependent on the collaborative's preference. And collaboratives can use these advance pay funds to provide advances to any partners in their collaborative that experience low cash flow. And the rest of the grant award will be dispersed through reimbursement. And like Sarah said earlier, we'll have quarterly reporting and invoicing, and that's flexible from monthly to quarterly. You can go to the next slide. So this is our timeline for round 2. You can find our NOFA and pre-proposal on our website. We will be having weekly office hours that started earlier this week or earlier this month up until September 6th. They're every Wednesday from 1 to 2. And then we have one last workshop tomorrow, which is a tribal communities workshop for tribal applicants or tribal-led organizations. And we just want to highlight that the pre-proposal is due on September 6th. The full proposal will be due on December 6th, and we will be doing finalist interviews in January of next year, and we will recommend awarded applications to the council in February of 2024. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So this application process will be submitted through a new platform called Submittable. You can access the direct application through our website, and we'll be doing a brief overview in the next few slides of Submittable, but just wanted to highlight that you can make a free account and applying is free, and you can save your application as you go until you're ready to submit. If you do submit your application before the September 6th deadline and you want to make a modification or change something in the proposal, you can send us an email and we'll be happy to reopen the application for you to modify as long as it's before the September 6th due date. And we'll have more information on the pre-proposal and Submittable in following slides in the presentation, but just wanted to highlight you'll be able to directly respond to any of the project details, narrative questions, and fill out your draft budget and upload your workbook and project area map onto Submittable, and you won't have to email us anything directly, aside from filling out the activity waiver request form if you do decide to go that route. And I just saw a question in the chat. If we have a submittable account for CRC grant, do we need to make a new account for this RFP? No, you don't need to make a new account. You can use the same account. You just have to access the RCC application platform, and that's on the RCC resources page. So you can have multiple accounts, multiple applications open at the same time. Thank you for that question. Okay, now we can go to the next slide. So for this program, we do maintain both the regional and a place-based component for the project to be eligible. The definition of region changed for this round, and it changed to increase the flexibility for applicants to be able to define their own region. So instead of now using a county scale, applicants can determine their own region based on shared natural, political, and built environmental systems, climate risks, and or other shared challenges or dynamics. And similar to last round, an applicant can determine their own regional boundary, but the region must be contiguous, and we will not be funding statewide collaboratives, for example, that go from all the way up north to the southernmost tip of the state. Next slide, please. So the project area requirement for the communities of focus, a communities of focus should be a census tract that represents the communities and neighborhoods where the collaborative would conduct its place-based work. A community of focus can be a single census tract or a cluster of census tracts, and there must be a minimum of 2 communities of focus that the collaborative proposes in their application. We do have a new and increased threshold requirement for communities of focus that are under-resourced to be eligible. So at least 75% of the communities of focus should meet our enabling statute's definition of under-resourced, or applicants can go the other route, which is they either meet that 75% under-resourced, or the tribal, or it can be tribal lands. The rest can be tribal lands. So as long as 50% of the communities of focus are under-resourced under SB 1072, the rest that up to the 75% can be tribal lands. So it can be 25% tribal lands, or it could be 60% under-resourced according to SB 1072, and then 15% tribal lands up until they meet the 75%. And then in this slide at the bottom 3 bullets are the definitions for under-resourced for our enabling statute. And I will pause right here for any questions or reactions. Yes, I see Johnny has a question.
Hello, my name is Johnny. I'm with Bakersfield American Indian Health Project. I had a question regarding where my organization would fall. We're an urban Indian organization, so we're not actually tribal, but we receive funding from Indian Health Services, and we service Native Americans and Alaska Natives.
Yeah, so we have a mapping tool that we'll showcase later. So you'll be able to use that mapping tool to put in your census tracts that you're going to be using, and you'll be able to see if your census tracts fall under the under-resourced or are tribal lands. And if you don't, if your census tracts that you propose don't fall under there, then you can put in a justification within Submittable to say why the communities you're focusing on are under-resourced. And then maybe it'll be more clear when we do the mapping review that Marky will do in a couple of slides.
So what you're saying is that it depends on what area we're serving.
Yes. Well, so if you're gonna use in the mapping tool, you'll be able to see the definitions for under-resourced and if they fall under that. But if they don't and they are tribal lands, or if they're another tribal community, then you'll be able to submit to us a justification of why, and then we can work with you to see if that's eligible.
So the population itself, it doesn't matter. It matters what the resources are available in the area.
Not so much the resources. Ina, I saw you went off mute.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in. I wasn't sure. I think Johnny, you were also asking about how your organization would qualify, and I think you would qualify as a community-based organization. The California Native American tribe definition is like related to the Native American Heritage Commission's contact list, and so, but there's no real difference in terms of the way that you qualify. You would qualify equally as a tribe. But that's maybe the response to that question. And then it seems like you were asking another question too around the
yeah, because it says definition under resourced or tribal lands. You know, if they're under resource, if they're tribal lands, it sounds like they're automatically under resourced, or be tribal lands as long as 50% of the communities of focus meet SB definition under resource. So I was curious to know which one of these we actually fell under, though, because all Native American Alaska Natives are considered underserved. So It just, you know, it's underserved versus under-resourced, I guess, the terminology. And I wanted to see what the difference was exactly in it. I guess I was getting at and where we fall.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally hear you. The definition is a little confusing, so we can also talk through that a little bit more too with the mapping tool, like Blanca was saying. But essentially, normally our program had this like project area of 75% needed to be under-resourced according to the definition that's in statute of under-resourced, that includes these 3 different like criteria essentially that are kind of collapsed into one definition of under-resourced. But we also heard from a lot of tribes that was not always perfectly inclusive of tribal lands. There is a component of the Calendar screen tool that folks may be familiar with that has, or the SP 535 tool, which is technically also counts as disadvantaged, that includes tribal lands, but it doesn't necessarily, it's not always like perfect in the way that it shows tribal lands. And so we added this additional like way for folks to qualify for the program as long as provide a justification that the lands that they're planning on working on are tribal lands, even if it's not recognized in the tool. And so up to 50% of the communities of focus would need to meet that under-resourced definition, but up to 25% could be those tribal lands that aren't actually included in the tool. I know it's a little bit in the weeds, but I also feel like maybe when we show the tool, that might also be more helpful, and we can always circle back to this conversation as well, if that would be helpful.
Yes, thank you. That definitely helps because we do serve non-federally recognized tribes and non-state recognized tribes. Whereas some of our members are on the California roll judgment, and so their lands are like just 45 minutes east of us. There's a non-federally recognized tribe there, large population of them, and we do service that area, but it wouldn't be considered tribal lands. But it sounds like, according to what you're saying, is that could, but there's some additional work involved in to identify it as such. So thank you, that helps.
Yeah, of course. And that's a really good point too, that the tribal lands tool doesn't include non-federally recognized tribes, but that definitely does qualify under our definition of tribal lands. That's a little bit broader. I see there are also a couple of other questions in the chat here. If there currently are not any tribes in the collaborative, can you still qualify, or do you have to have tribes involved at the start? Oh, it looks like Sarah's just responded to that question. It's not a requirement that all eligible applicant types are in your collaborative. Collaboratives are eligible as long as all partners are an eligible applicant type. Yeah, that's a great response. And then another question here: how many total collaboratives do you expect to fund in the small and large grant tracts? Sorry if this was already covered. Yeah, so I don't know if it was shown on the slide here, but Blanca, I know you just explained that. Do you want to take that question?
Yeah. So for each small and large grant, we're going to fund 2 of the highest scoring applications from each tract, and within we expect to have additional funding available after that, and then we'll fund additional next scoring applications with the remaining funds. And so that's dependent on just how much funding we have, but probably maybe another 2 at least. So 2 from each track, and then hopefully an additional 2 after. All right. If there are no more questions, then I will pass it over to Marky.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marky Price, and I'm a program associate for the team, and my pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm going to be doing a short overview of the mapping tool. So the purpose of the RCC mapping tool is so that applicants could create their project area maps, and the project area map should show the region that the RCC will be working within and a minimum of 2 communities of focus within that region. So I'll now share my screen to show the mapping tool. So this is the RCC mapping tool. I'm pretty sure my colleagues are putting the links in the chat to it. It's currently on the RCC resources page. And over here to the left, we have the layer list, and the layer that's currently turned on is the census tracts and tribal area boundaries layer. And this is what applicants will use to select their communities of focus. And these 4 layers here represent the SB 1072 definition of under-resourced. And they come from the California Environmental Protection Agency, the California Department of Water Resources, and the California Air Resources Board. And these layers are optional. Applicants don't have to turn these on, but if they want to see where their census tract or tribal area boundary lies within these different mapping tools, they can turn them on to check, but it's not a requirement. And the remaining layers are optional regional boundaries that applicants could use to create their region. And over here in the upper left-hand corner, we have zoom tools. So applicants could use this to zoom in and zoom out on the area that they would like to work in. And they could also use their mouse. And here we have the select tool. And you can use that to select your communities of focus and your region. And then this is the add data tool. Applicants could use this to add any regional boundaries that they may have already, if they have any shape files or anything like that. And it's also used to differentiate between communities of focus and region. And then this tool is the draw tool, and applicants could use this to draw any custom regional boundaries that they may have. Or that they may have in mind if they don't like any of the preset regions here and they don't have any GeoJSONs or shape files that they would like to add in. And then over here to the right, you could search for your census tract or your tribal area boundary if you know the address of the area that you would like to work within. And then here at the bottom is the communities of focus calculator. And when selecting their communities of focus, applicants could look at this pie chart and they'll be able to determine if the communities of focus meet the program eligibility requirements. And so the orange represents under-resourced census tracts. And here, the lighter orange represents tribal under-resourced areas. And like Ina mentioned, we did this because there are some tribal areas that are not, that are considered within SB 535. They are a part of the tool, and but census tracts are not tribal areas. So we thought this would be a better way so applicants could differentiate between the two. And we also have this blue right here, which represents not under-resourced areas or not under-resourced census tracts. So applicants could use this to determine if their communities of focus meet our requirements. And also, like was mentioned earlier, if there are any tribal areas that are not within this tool, you would submit a justification for it in the pre-proposal application, and then you would select the census tract that is over the area that you would like to work within that is not in the tool. So I will be in office hours every Wednesday to talk about this, and I'm going to answer any questions now. But there is a detailed video tutorial on our website and detailed instructions. And if you have any questions, you can email case at sgc.ca.gov. So I'm gonna look at the chat, see if there's any questions. Someone was asking, can I do one as an example? By one, could you clarify what you mean?
Maybe asking if it's possible to do a map.
One.
I think because we're getting a lot of questions and I want to make sure that we're mindful of time, maybe we could circle back and do an example potentially at the end if we have time. The other thing too is that Marky has put together a really great tutorial that's available online where she actually does an example map, and we were thinking it might be easier for you all once you're starting to work on your map to actually just have that resource, as well as some great mapping instructions, and actually Blanca put them in the chat. So maybe not right now, but we could always circle back if we have some extra time to do an example.
Someone asked, do disaster impacted census tracts, burn scar areas qualify as a community of focus? So what is considered under-resourced is dependent upon the different definitions in SB 1072. I know one comes from Cal EnviroScreen, which incorporates different factors, I think air pollution, and other factors. So I think maybe with Cal and ViroScreen, they could. And then the other requirements have to do more with income. So not a guarantee, but it's a possibility.
Yeah, not necessarily capture, burn scar areas, for example, but we do have in our application process some questions related to need for the project. And so I think that's a place where you can really kind of describe a little bit more like what are the specific needs within the locations that you're working in, and kind of make a case for the importance of the work that you're doing, how the work of this collaborative would be able to address some of those really key needs. So I would definitely recommend taking a look at our scoring criteria as well, because we do have a scoring criterium related to climate related needs that might also be, something that would be relevant here.
Thanks for sharing, Ina. If there are no other questions, I'll pass it back to my colleague Blanca.
Thank you, Marky. Okay. So now we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the pre-proposal. So we're having issues loading the map. We can drop the link again in case it got cut off, but I think it might take a while to load. It is kind of like, it has a lot of layers. The tool has a lot of layers, so you might have to let it load for a bit. So the purpose of the pre-proposal is so that we can assess, and applicants can also assess whether you're on track to submit a complete and competitive application by the end of the full proposal period. The pre-proposal is required, unlike last round, in order to submit a full proposal. So, and then the components of the pre-proposal, if you haven't logged on to Submittable yet, you'll have an area where you can include more detail on your project partners, respond to the narrative questions, upload your draft work plan, fill in your draft budget, and then upload your draft project area map. All of these are drafts. You don't have to have all the details figured out. We just want to encourage applicants to start putting in thought and working with your collaborative partners so that we can give you as much qualitative feedback as possible by the end in September, so that you should assess whether you want to submit a full application or not. And I'll note that the pre-proposals will not be scored. We're just going to provide feedback, and you won't have to be beholden to any of the information you put in the pre-proposal in the full proposal. So you can go ahead and change information or add new partners in the full proposal as well. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So for the full proposal, we will release all application materials for the full proposal. They'll be available on Submittable, and we'll have that on September 7th, right after the pre-proposal due date. For the full proposal, we will do a threshold check, meaning that you have to meet all of the eligibility requirements upon submission to be eligible. We will review the application and we'll conduct or launch an interagency panel to do the review, and top scoring applicants will be selected for an interview in January. So the full proposal builds upon the pre-proposal by having more in-depth narrative questions. The workbook will also be a little bit more in-depth, and the budget. However, it has been streamlined from round one, meaning we cut down a lot of information, but we still want to see detail behind like the tasks, the subtasks, and the budget allocation to different cost details. I'll also highlight what Ina and Sarah highlighted earlier in the presentation, that the partnership agreement at the time of the full proposal does not have to be signed. You can go ahead and execute that partnership agreement once an application has been awarded in the grant agreement phase. And there's also resolutions and letters of authorization required for the managing partner. or tribal partner, and letters of commitment from each partner in the collaborative. Okay, let me go to the next slide. So now I'll be demonstrating how to make an account with Submittable. So I will share my screen. One moment. Okay, so this is our RCC resources page. You can get here by going to programs, going to our case team program page, and then clicking on application materials for RCC. You'll also be able to access the mapping tools through this page as well. But what you'll need to do is you can download the Excel spreadsheet for the workbook where you'll be filling in your work plan. And you'll have to download it, fill it out, and then upload that on Submittable where it will prompt you. So you're going to click on submit a pre-proposal. And apologies if it's a little bit slow. I'm actually going to turn off my video to help. So this is where it's going to take you. I'm already logged in. If you're not logged in, you'll just have to make an account, but it's relatively simple to do that. And then this gives you a link to submit or to go into the form page. So we advise you all to read the instructions carefully just to make sure that you don't miss any details. We have links to the guidelines and links to other important resources as well. While we're waiting on it to load, I will highlight that this area right here where it says manage collaborators, this is where you can invite other partners in your collaborative to collaborate on filling out the form. One thing that we do advise though is that you don't try to save over each other. So I will just make sure that if you're logged in and someone else wants to work on it and you want to save, just have the other person log out of the form just so that you can save because it can override responses. But here you can click on this and you can email any of your partners to collaborate and they'll be able to access the form that you're working on. So this first section gives you boxes where you're going to be able to put the detailed information for your managing partner. It asks you to describe your history of providing community-based outreach or technical assistance. And then you're going to have to click on what's your managing organization type. And here is that kind of catch-all option if your organization does not fall into these. So if you're an organization with a history of providing community-based outreach or TA. And then here you're going to have to put in all your other partners that you have on board for the collaborative. In the pre-proposal phase, it's okay if you don't have a minimum of 4. In the full proposal phase, you'll have to have a minimum of 4. And then you can put, if you have more than 4 at this point, you can add additional partners here, and then it'll prompt you if you have more, and then you'll just have to keep filling it out. And then we have a region and community of focus section where you'll respond to questions about your region and your communities of focus. And here, this is where you'll have to upload a screenshot of your draft project area map, and then include the percentage of under-resourced communities. And that is based on, in the mapping tool, you can see the pie chart that when Marky was demonstrating the mapping tool, it's on the bottom, and that's where you're going to put the percentage. And then the mapping tool also tells you the total number of census tracts that you selected, or if you know that by counting it, that's okay too. And this is for if tribal lands are not included in the tribal area map in the mapping tool, then you can here put in the justification of how your tribal areas meet the definition of under-resourced. And so here we have just another narrative question relating to your vision and more narrative question related to the program objectives. And this is where you're going to fill out your budget. For the pre-proposal, it's fairly simple. You just have to designate whether you're a small grant or large grant. And then here you'll have to fill out just for this, your organization name and then the estimated budget for each partner organization that you have. In the full proposal, it's going to ask you more detail about whether it's going to staff costs or if it's an indirect cost or if it's travel costs. But right here, you don't have to have an estimated number for that. You'll just have to maybe provide a justification as to why you have an estimated budget so far, but you don't have to have it all figured out yet in the pre-proposal, but we do encourage you to put as much thought as possible. And then here's where you're gonna upload that workbook spreadsheet. You can download it here, or you can download it in our RCC resources page. And that should be it. I'll pause here if there are any questions or reactions to that. So Sarah was answering some questions in the chat. Thank you, Sarah. Let me know if I missed any. And yes, there's a project area guidance that is a great resource on what you should consider when determining your region. Okay. If there's no questions on Submittable, then we can go on with the presentation. Okay, so we have, now I'll share some more information on the support and the resources that we have available to applicants. So we have one more workshop tomorrow for tribal communities from 1:30 to 3, and you can register for that tomorrow in our resources page. But we also have the webinar recorded that's going to be already posted, and we have the rural communities workshop that's going to be posted on our website as well. Okay, now we can go on to the next slide. We also have a really great TA team that's on board to provide direct application support. They were our TA team last round as well, and so they're very familiar with the program. It's comprised of Estelano Advisors, California Coalition for Rural Housing, Institute for Local Government, and Better World Group. And so I'll pause here and invite Cynthia to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks, Blanca. Yes, Cynthia Guzman. I'm a principal at Estelano Advisors, and I work with the technical assistance team. So myself and individuals from these organizations will be available for technical assistance during the full application phase of the program. This is our second time around providing technical assistance in RCC, but collectively the team does have quite a bit of experience providing technical assistance on a host of SGC funded programs. So good to see all of you, and back to you, Blanca.
Thank you, Cynthia. Okay, can go on to the next slide. I'll talk a little bit about what TA offerings the TA team can offer. So right now they're available in our weekly office hours that are every Wednesday, and you'll have to register on Zoom for that, but you can register at any point in advance of the meetings up until September 6th. And then right now we are offering consultation service calls that are one-on-one with TA providers, and that is for a limited amount for round 1 applicants that we are prioritizing applicants that are representing rural or tribal communities and with a high number of under-resourced areas. So if you are interested in a consultation call and you're a round one applicant, you can email us at case@sgc.ca.gov, and we can send you that intake form. And of course, they're available to answer any questions that you have about the program, workshop any ideas. And during the full proposal phase, after the proposals are submitted, they'll be able to provide mapping support with the mapping tool, develop your work plan or budget, develop your collaborative partnership structure, review your narrative responses, and help you prep for the interview if you're selected for one. Oh, and I have a question from Quinn. Sorry if you missed this. For the mapping, do the census tracts have to be actually contiguous or just close? No, they don't have to be contiguous or really close. They have to be within your region. So to put you would select your region, or you can select your communities of focus first and then select your region, but the communities of focus just have to be within that region boundary. And then the region has to be continuous. So if you determine your region based on counties, those counties have to be contiguous. Okay, thanks for that question. Zoom just asked me if I'm playing music because there's a lot of noise in the background. So glad no one can hear that. Okay, you can go to the next slide. Yes, we will be, we can send you all the recorded video later this week of this workshop, and we'll also be posting prior webinars and workshops on our YouTube page. Oh, and another question, how do we sign up for office hours? And I think there was the link posted in the chat. And then if you want a consultation service call, you can email us, and then we will determine if you're eligible for one and send you the form for that. Okay. So we have prepared several application resources. That's on our resources application page. We have different templates for collaboratives to use. All the letter of commitments, authorizations, the unsigned partnership agreement. We also have a lot of guidance documents that we highly suggest you all use when preparing your application. Sarah shared the example activity table earlier and the project area guidance. And then we'll also have a sample grant agreement coming soon on our website, and also a guidance document on community compensation where you can determine and draw from to put into your proposal on how you'll want to compensate community and communities in your application and activities. We also have the mapping tool that Marky developed and demonstrated earlier, along with that video and mapping tool instruction document. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so I wanted to highlight our threshold and scoring criteria. The threshold criteria and the scoring criteria will be applied in the full proposal stage. So you don't necessarily have to need it for the pre-proposal, but it's good to keep in mind and know what you need in order to be eligible so that you are not caught off guard later. So we are going to be checking for general completeness. So please make sure that all the materials are submitted and complete, that the funding amount falls within those 2 tracks. And then that everyone is eligible, and especially your managing partner, you'll want to justify and provide documentation or explanation that you're able to manage an RCC award if you're awarded. And also that eligible project area as well, we're going to be looking at closely just to make sure that the region is contiguous and that all under-resourced or all communities of focus meet the eligibility, and that at least 75% of those are under-resourced. Okay. I will go on to the next slide. Let me go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So this slide is a point breakdown for all of the components in the full proposal. So you'll see here just what you need to, the different components. Most of these are narrative responses, and then the rest will be like your partnership agreement, your work plan, budget, and other documentation. So we'll flag that it's really important to communicate what your project need is for your region, how your program is going to advance the 4 program objectives, and we'll really want to see a clear justification and detail as to why the partners came together for this opportunity. So if you're an emerging collaborative, you haven't worked together before, you just want to see a detail of like why you think you'll be able to work together well, what your collective goals are. And if you're an established collaborative and you have worked together in the past, we want to see information and detail of what projects you've worked on in the past or what you've accomplished together. And something new to this round is that we have an interview component in the scoring criteria. So now that's an additional 10 points on top of the 150 baseline points. And I'll go to the next slide. We just wanted to highlight our round 1 grantees. The link to the profiles were linked earlier in the chat, but we awarded 6 grantees across the state. 3 were tribal led or had a tribal partner, and then there was 1 from a rural area, and then different ones in the Northern San Joaquin Valley and Southern California, and then the Bay Area. So you can find these and other unawarded applicant profiles on our website. And there's a question in the chat. I filled out the form for office hours and it said no registration is required. We will look into the registration form for the office hours. I will just save that link so that you can have it when we fix it. Zoom has been giving us problems with that registration. Apologies for
Yeah,
that.
I was gonna say the same thing. I'll try to fix it. I fixed it like 5 times and it keeps erasing the registration for some reason. But is there a way for you all to download the link as a calendar invite or the event as a calendar invite? No, okay.
We can forward the link to everyone in this
Yeah.
call.
Yeah, I saw.
Oh, you're unmuted. You're muted, Ina.
Okay, does that work okay? I called in on my phone and I was trying to, yeah, anyway, sorry about that. I was just gonna say that for there were a couple of questions related to like follow-up that we could do in terms of like setting up the link and follow back up with the registration link as well once we get that figured out. But yeah, that was the end of our presentation today. And apologies, I'm seeing that I have an unstable internet connection, so I may go off video, but basically this is all of your time to be able to ask questions and you know, talk through anything that would be helpful for you all. See a question coming through. Would an SFA area applicant not be eligible for round 2 funding because of the round 1 grant award? It's a huge region. That's a great question. That would not be the case. So we, first of all, the way that the scoring criteria works, we would still be offering like the 2 top funding, large track and small track, large grant track and small grant track. Applications would be funded no matter where they're located in the state. And then it would just be for the sort of remaining amount where we would be focusing on applications that have not previously received an RCC award, either in round 1 or in round 2, meaning from those sort of top 4 that would end up getting funded through that process. And because like there was an application that came forward in Marin, but that wouldn't preclude the rest of the Bay Area throughout that, for that geographic distribution component as well. So we're just looking for recognizing that our funding is limited and the importance of sort of spreading collaboratives across the state. We're trying to make sure that we're able to offer some of that geographic diversity as a part of the program. Is there a project start date if funded? That's a great question. Wondering, Blanca and Sarah, if you have want to answer that.
Yeah, so awards will be made in February of 2024, and the grant like execution process can take 3 to 6 months. I think we had a lot of learnings from our first grant agreement process, so I think it can be a little quicker this time around, but I think it's safe to say like late spring, early summer of 2024 is when grant agreements will be executed, potentially even before.
Great, thanks for that, Sarah. I'm seeing a couple of questions come through around the geographic diversity piece. So projects with Marin census tracts would not be recommended. I actually included the exact language in our guidelines as a response to an earlier question, and maybe it would be helpful for me to drop that language back in the chat, but essentially we're likely to currently in the grant range. And so the 2 top scoring applications from the large grant track and the 2 top scoring applications from the small grant track will be selected for award no matter where they're located in the state. And so then it's only with our remaining amount to funding that then we on air that had not yet received an award. So essentially the majority of the awards will still be going most likely to those it'll depend on how the funding shakes out, but most likely definitely 4 will be selected based on the large grant track and small grant track criteria. And then probably it'll be only 2, maybe 3 that would be awarded using that geographic diversity component. I hope that helps. And I can also drop in, I know it's a little difficult to explain, so I can also find the language there and drop it back into the chat, because I think seeing it written might be helpful as well.
Yeah, I had a question. This grant, if approved, does the grantee receive the what rate does the grantee receive funding? It's and it's not a fee for service. Fee for service is you do the work and then you get paid reimbursed. Can you share a little bit, Blanca, about is it do you get a percentage of the grant up front, or how does that work out?
Yeah, so it's eligible for up to 25% of the grant for upfront if you want to do it in one large sum or break it out throughout the 3-year grant term. And then the rest of the 75% will be through reimbursement basis. And then with our reimbursement basis, you would submit an invoice, and then we try to get that invoice turned around and paid out within 45 days, if I remember correctly.
Okay, so my second question is, does the calculus within you guys preview provide the 25%? Will that carry you over? Will that carry an agency to then move forward for fee for service and provide you the invoice, and then you bill out 45 days later? Will it cover you for the 25%? Would it cover for several months so that we can get the ball rolling, that we're not stuck as an agency trying to recoup money to pay Paul to steal from Peter?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it depends on the cash flow for your partners, for the managing partner and the rest of your partners. If you want to do it the 25% as one large sum so that you can carry it out for the first few months to get going, you can do that. There are other options, such as you can like draw it out, that total 25%. So if your total grant requested and awarded is 1.75 million, and you want the 25% advance pay, that would be like, I can do math real quick, but you would get the 25% of that large sum. You can carry it out throughout your grant term so that you can have kind of like cash flow, but it's obviously it's not going to be the whole grant amount. Want to add anything to that? Or Ina?
I think that, yeah, you covered that. So it's both advance pay and reimbursement. We wish we could offer all of it through advance pay, but the state's a little bit limited in being able to administer funds entirely in advance.
Well, thank you for that response. I think that it makes it a little clearer. Yeah, I think that's doable. If 25% of $1 million is forwarded out, then we can do that. The invoicing, Blanca, can you share a little bit about the invoicing? Is it quarterly? Is it monthly? Because you're looking at a 45-day turnaround. When is that? How is that process?
So invoicing can be due on monthly to a quarterly basis, dependent on your preferences. If you want to do monthly invoicing, you would submit us, the invoice on a monthly day, recurring day, and then we would have 45 days to turn that back around. And we try to be quick about processing invoices, but just we have that like 45-day period to get that paid out.
To clarify, our team has to review within 15 days upon submission of a accurate and complete invoice. And so we'll look at those quickly, let you know if it looks good or if there's any glaring issues, and then we'll do our end, and then we need to send it off to our accounts payable, and then that they're the next step in the process of getting within that 45 days.
Sarah, I like the way you premise that accurate reporting, right? So that's the hang up. If it's skewed, it goes back to the grantee, and then they have to fix it, and then you still have a lead time of 45 days out, right? So to get it fixed. And then the invoicing coming back, if it's cleared, the payment is direct deposit, I'm assuming.
I'm not entirely sure if it's direct deposit or checks, but we can double check and add this. We're gonna release an FAQ page on our website. We're still in the process of fully putting in all of the questions for that, and then we'll answer that question in the FAQ and can email that out once that page goes live.
There was a question from Maki earlier in the chat about LA County. If we're focusing on a specific part of LA, can it still qualify? Yes. If you can still qualify, and you can be selected for an award if you're within the top 2 grants for each track. But then after those, we've awarded those other those first 2 top scoring applications from each track, then we will take into consideration that geographic component. Oh, just saw your chat. Thanks, Maki.
Any other questions? I know earlier maybe there was some confusion partially on my end around the eligible activities. So I want to make sure folks are feeling like clear on the eligible activities. Can you give us examples of eligible activities again? Yeah, Cynthia, are we able to go to the activity table slide? So I'll start by saying that in our guidelines, we have a list of activities that collaboratives have to do, and we organize them by types. And so just to help organize it a little bit, and I know it makes it maybe a little confusing though. And so these activity types, within each of them, there's a few bullets within the guidelines that say what that type entails. And so if we go forward 1 slide or 2 slides, 4 slides to the activity table. I'm having afternoon brain. One more.
Which slide do you?
Sorry, the activity table.
Okay, this one?
Yes.
Okay.
So in the workbook, you'll, so big purpose of the program is to identify funding sources so you can pursue and access investment within communities that have the greatest need for those specific projects. And so this overall activity of identifying funding sources is aligned with a number of the required activity types. I'm sorry, my family is blowing up my family chat about the Dodgers. So if there's any Dodgers fans in the room, hello. So within your workbook, you'll break down your activity into subtasks, and the subtasks is really how you're going to communicate how you're addressing the required activities. And so under activity type 1, there's a required activity of conducting community engagement. And so this subtask is the collaborative will organize community engagement, but rather than just saying we're going to do community engagement, they explain the type of community engagement, like walk audits, charrettes, pop-ups, and why they're doing that community engagement to collect data. There you're also hitting on some of the other required activities or optional activities. And then you can determine however many subtasks you want with each broad activity that you're doing. And so the second subtask is directly with some of the activities under activity type 1 of identifying funding sources or identifying projects and plans that your collaborative can pursue. And so it really explains that, but in giving an example of what that looks like. So we don't want to see work plans that just repeat what's in the guidelines. We want you to add a little bit more detail there. And so the second subtask is directly addressing some of those. And then the third subtask also is another example of how the community or the collaborative actually votes on and pursues specific projects. And I'm seeing the chat. Is that helpful to kind of understanding how you can approach the activities? Okay, great. I'm glad. And again, office hours are a great place for folks to just stop by and be like, okay, this is what I'm proposing, I'm thinking about for activity or a subtask. Is this actually addressing the activity type? And I think our TA team will be able to offer thoughts there.
All right. Well, I think we are at time, but definitely encourage folks, as Sarah just said, to stop by our office hours. We're always happy to kind of talk through some of these pieces, and then also, sign up for consultation calls if you applied in round 1. We do have another last workshop tomorrow that's focused on specifically on tribes and tribal serving organizations. So definitely feel free to share with any of your tribal partners that may be interested in the program. And you can also always feel very free to reach out to us at our email address at case@sgc.ca.gov with any question that comes to mind. And we'll be also putting together an FAQ on our website where we can have, make sure that we're sharing the answers to all of those questions with everyone. So thank you. Thanks for sharing. Great, but hope that this was a helpful workshop for you all. And yeah, please do just, continue to feel free to reach out. We're here to respond to questions. And really excited to be launching the second round of the program. So with that, I think we'll close and just thank you all. And we look forward to continuing the conversation moving forward. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining.